Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're watching us from. On behalf of the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement and the Water Policy Center, it gives me immense pleasure in extending a warm welcome to our chair, Viktoria Ivanchenko, speakers and participants who have registered for the event. We are so glad that you could join us today at the NIICE WPS International Conference on the post-pandemic world order, navigating the new normal. Throughout the 3-day conference, we will be having 30 sessions that will take place simultaneously on 2 Zoom rooms. We have around 150 experts and speakers who are joining us from 30 different countries who will be delivering their presentations and sharing their expertise with us. This is the 7th session of the conference. To chair and moderate the session, we have with us Viktoria Ivanchenko. Viktoria Ivanchenko is a visiting fellow at NIICE. Her research focus is public diplomacy, media technologies, integration process in Europe and Eurasia, Russia-West relations, post-Soviet space. She is the editor-in-chief at Pikriadi, an NGO which is based in Moscow. Prior to this, she was an intern at the Verkhovna Rada, which is the Parliament of Ukraine. She has also worked as a teacher in the Higher School of Economics in Moscow and as a media relations in the charity sphere. Victoria holds a master's in European studies from the Higher School of Economics, Russia, and bachelor's in international relations from the Donetsk National University in Ukraine. She regularly contributes to Russian International Affairs Council, Russia in Global Affairs, and several think tanks and the media. Now, without any further ado, let me request Viktoria Ivanchenko to moderate the session. The floor is yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Rangoli. Good afternoon to everyone from Moscow. We're going to proceed now with the discussion of the post-pandemic world order. And we have, in fact, less than 2 hours. And today we, at session 7, have 4 speakers. All of them are from India. I will introduce now shortly everyone. And I will give from 10 to, I guess, 12 minutes for the speech. And then we will have some time for discussion and questions. So today we have Professor Liaquat Ayub Khan from Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai, India. Also, we have Dr. Aslam Khan from Department of Gandhian and Peace Studies, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, India. Dr. Rashmi Kazi, Associate Professor, Jamia Millia Islamia, India. And also Dr. Lenin Kumar, Assistant Professor, School of Government, MIT World Peace University in India. I will follow the order which we have on the panel, and the floor will be given to Professor Liaquat Ayub Khan. I hope that everyone is with us already now. So if you hear me, did Doctor join us? I don't see, unfortunately.
He has joined.
Oh, yes, I see, I see. Yes. Good afternoon. So please, Dr. Liaquat Khan, the floor will be yours now. We will be happy to hear from you about new tools of foreign policy in post-pandemic world.
Okay. Good afternoon to all organizers and panelists of this webinar, honorable dignitaries of NIICE and water policy, and friends and colleagues. I'm very happy to converse with you all onto my thoughts on the new tools of foreign policy. Now, when we have been studying foreign policy, earlier traditional ideas were being utilized in order to understand foreign policy from the Western thought provocations. A lot of Western authors were used to write a lot of things on foreign policy, and it was being used by all the academicians and all the experts all over the world. Now, what I personally would like to say is this COVID-19, the pandemic has actually brought in a lot of new thoughts on to understand the foreign policy problems within states, within the region, and the world order, because we have been into different hemisphere. So with this new idea of understanding foreign policy would also has also brought a lot of new tools to understand the states. The states earlier used to think that they are also they have a control of the world order. They have some control of the world order, but pandemic has actually shown them that they don't have. Each state has to bring in relations, and those relations will only come with certain ideas. And now we see in foreign policy, there are certain areas where it has to be understood. Before we go into the understanding of the impact of COVID, we also have to understand that states are also dealing with the facts. Once they are dealing with facts, but facts also has a lot of resemblance to the myths. States do have myths. Not only states have facts, but they also have myths, and they also go with these myths in order to understand the region, the states, and thereby they develop these myths into a wishful thinking. And when foreign policy apparatus does not operate onto the facts, and if they operate only on the myth, they are into a very disastrous situation. In the sense that earlier the instruments of foreign policy were what you have. One was diplomacy, the second was foreign aid, and the third was the military force. Like many states, many leaders used to also propagate that wherever the foreign policy moves, the state's military power also moves. Today, in this pandemic, it has also shown that it is not the military power that will dictate terms between states. The states have to come onto a common platform. The states have also to manage. Now, when we say manage, it also have to understand that how they are going to better their relations. Now, when we say better the relations, what are we talking of foreign policy? Why do we require a foreign policy? The foreign policy is an extension of a domestic policy. As Bernard Brody used to say in his book, that it's an extension. Domestic policy is foreign policy is an extension of domestic policy. Whatever is the requirement of a domestic policy would be fetched out by the foreign policy. And thereby, in foreign policy apparatus, national interest becomes very important. Each states are being talking of protecting its own national interest, as if my interest, as if the interest of one state is different by the interest of the other states. Each state has to be each state is basically thinking of developing. Each state is also thinking of having national security. Now, one of the very important instrument of foreign policy talks of national security. Now, in earlier terms, the traditional idea of protecting a state would be through the military power. If the states harness military power, they are protected. Now, when you say the security of the state is basically just protection, it has moved out of this particular idea of giving a thought onto having a idea of protecting a state with a military hardware. Now, security is not just military hardware. Neither security is an understanding of military force. It is much beyond. Now, when we say the foreign policy nowadays are also talking of national developments. Now, it is not only national security, but also national development. And when we say national development, each state has to look after the national development of its own state. Now, without implementation of diplomacy, in order to have national development, it will be a farce. Unless until the state thinks of its own development, And that is what the pandemic has brought the states to rethink, that the state has to think of its own people. The state has to think of its own resources. State has also to look after its own governance. It cannot go the Indian leader cannot be very powerful in China. Indian leader cannot be very powerful in Pakistan. He has to be very powerful in India within its own territory, and thereby security is not of just territory, but is also of national development. What are you securing? You are securing national development. The state has to look after to this part, and this remains to be very constant. Like states which have not thought of having health infrastructure are really in this particular pandemic period, they have landed into a lot of troubles. In the sense that they have not given the due to the population. They have not given a lot of health infrastructure to people, and thereby this has brought states into a problematic situation. If a state would like to, and the other tool of other instrument of foreign policy, if you see the new tool which has emerged, is basically technology. Now, technology, I say that the states cannot remain in isolation. Like when we say that one earlier that India as a state wanted to have a technology transfer from Soviet in order to get cryogenic engine, in order to develop its own space, its own missile, but it did not get. So technology has become one of the most important tool into foreign policy, in the sense that we account for getting huge technological sharing among states. The states, if they don't share, like for example, what has happened in China, and everybody would like to know how this particular virus has gone from one state to the other state, and thereby trying to build on to get closer to the fact of this particular pandemic. And thereby the state has to realize that technology plays a very important role. Now, apart from technology, you also have a new tool which is coming up. And when we say earlier, the states used to talk of power structures. The states were power hungry. They would like to have a lot of power with them. But non-traditional threats have brought in states into such a situation where they cannot work in isolation. Pandemic has brought in the idea of that the state has to share. Like for example, in the month of April, suddenly Americans wanted to have more of a tablet which in India was being used for a dengue fever. For a fever, it was being used, but then this was not in requirement prior to pandemic. But it became very important for Americans, and the American president himself went on to ask for that particular medicine, and where India had to, or in India did send, and thereby now you need to share your knowledge. Now you have to not only share knowledge but also align. You cannot remain into isolation, and thereby alliances have become one of the very important tools of foreign policy. And thereby the next one of the very important tool of again foreign policy is the space research that is happening all over. Now the states cannot remain to be in isolation. One state which is having a space research cannot just say no to the other state, because it has to share. And thereby, according to many authors who have been bringing a lot of ideas, saying that the space research will bring a lot of new development. Now, there are also realist hawks. Why I say again realist hawks? Because the realists do not have an understanding that just merely protecting state, territorial state, will not suffice, will not give uh, benefits for the will not give benefit for the states. But if you look at to non-traditional threats like the pandemic or like the climate change, now the states have to actually prioritize the threats. Earlier, the states themselves were threats to the other states. Now you don't have those states not becoming threats to the other states, but you have non-traditional threats which have become important. Now look at to this particular pandemic. It has actually brought the whole world into a standstill. Every state is trying to have some or the other kind of lockdown. Now, lockdown is not a better proposition, but they have to bring lockdown as one of the tool in order to protect the particular states, and thereby these realist hawks are also not understanding. Like realism for a particular movement is understanding, but also it is important to understand that economic interdependence also plays a very important role in building in building the national development of states. The states can only develop if they share, and solely maximization of power will not suffice. It is also economic interdependence. If India is developing, the neighboring states are also to be onto the pathway of development. The states should put their lot of efforts in order to see that the neighboring states are also developed, and that's the reason the states have seen that they have been.
Dr. Han, I'm sorry, I would ask you to conclude this. Just one
Yeah.
minute left.
Now,
Yeah.
in order to conclude, there are certain contemporary issues which have to be seen with respect to new tools of foreign policy. There is a one is that there is a very clear global shift which is happening in order to understanding of foreign policy. Earlier, the changing world order thought of having geopolitical issues at the core. Now you have non-traditional issues at the core. And when we say non-traditional issues, now human security becomes very important. Earlier, humans were not considered very important for the states. Now you see human security remains to be one of the important center force, and thereby we also have to see what the constructivists are also trying to tell us, that it is constructivists like Alexander Venn who talks of that anarchy is what state make of it. Like it is friends or enemy is being decided by the state. It is not there. The enemy or the friends are not there. It is the state who would decide, who would imagine who their enemies are, imagine who their friends are. So you see the state's foreign policy should see the health issues are also important for the state's development, and thereby in order to see that the national development becomes a core into the state's foreign policy development. So in order to conclude, I would say post-COVID scenario has brought in changes into mindsets, and these mindsets have also brought in the imaginary threats which earlier were there between states, have and the securitization of the foreign policy have been overshadowed by the human development. The states have to think of human development rather than thinking of securitization of the states. I really thank for the organizers to give me this opportunity to speak to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Han. Probably we'll have some questions later. Thank you for your speech. I really found many interesting traits about the development of the current world. And I also can say that here from Russia, we see that we're now more focused on domestic issues and development of the nation from the inside. So thank you. Now we move to the next speaker. That is Dr. Aslam Khan from Department of Gandhian and Peace Studies of Mahatma Gandhi Central University in India. His talk is about power, hegemony, and fractured world order. So please, your turn, Dr. Aslam Khan.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Everybody can hear?
Yes, yes.
So first of all, I offer my sincere thanks to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal for inviting me on such a grand event, a big event. So my talk today is on power, hegemony, and fractured world order. So when we are talking of the power, or we are seeing the world power structure in the modern time, and if we are seeing the IR, it has been more complex in the 21st century. The most important thing is the unholy marriage of liberalism and realism trapped the nations of the world in a way where there is no return back situation. And survival of the fittest in the anarchic environment shaped the foreign policy of all the nations of the world. Power, for instance, is the ability of one country to get another to do or something not to do. Something shifting away from US to China, for instance, and US power with the presidency of the Trump is weakening in the present time by taking the America First initiative. So the past US unilateral wars and influence on all institutions of the world brought as a great hegemony. That hegemony is being challenged by China, or being challenged by China in a present world order. China is getting stronger and demanded recognition of its ownership of the China Seas, something most of the world regarded as absurd and threatening. China constructed a string of pearls, safe ports across the Indian Ocean. Its vital supply route energy and other resources of Middle East and Africa. Now US is confronting the expansion of Chinese power and US national interests sufficiently that involved to risk naval conflict in Asia. But on the other hand, China is resisting against it and consider China's sea is Chinese business only. This message has been delivered by China to use to go to any extent with regard to the South China Sea. Recently, China fired 2 missiles, I think 1 day back or 2 days back, anti-ship missiles that are aircraft carrier killer 2 in South China Sea. The day before, US flew spy planes through the at least 2 areas where drills were being held. So when we see we are talking of the world order. So if we are going the past history, we can see the 4 kinds of the world order. Then this turbulent 20th century is witnessing that first one was the pre-World War I that was dominated of great European empires in the 20th century until 1940, where you can, it is easily visible the system theory, and this period exemplifies a balance of power system. Then we see the second one is the World War I to the World War II, that period is from 1914 to 1945. This was the interwar period, and we can call it as a balance of power. And the third phase of world order, we can see the Cold War. And it was the phase where we can see the collapse of the European powers resulted in the bipolar system led by the USA and USSR. Then we can see the post-Cold War period, the collapse of the Soviet Union that ends bipolarity, and the world order has dominated by USA as a unipolar world power. But the new system in the unipolar system, even at the later stage, are disputed since Donald Trump's presidency, ranging from multipolar, like several power centers that we can assess now, to zone of chaos, and from globalization to China-US rivalry. So these are the several possibilities of dominating world order. Then now that my topic is the fractured world order. So we can see a kind of the fractured world order where there is a shift of power, and the allies, they are in the confusion what to do, where to go. Same is the case in the Middle East, same is the case in Asia and other places of the world. So if we are putting a theoretical discourse into it, like if we are talking of the hegemonic stability theory, for instance, so the states are distinguished by their degree of power and degree of satisfaction. These are the 2 important components. So this theory holds that states tend to align on the basis of interest, that is status quo. Status quo means satisfied nations, and against the revisionist means dissatisfied nations. Although the alliances may not always be formal. Status quo states come together if the existing order is threatened by the revisionist state. We can take the historical example in the mid-1930s that US, France, and UK didn't form an alliance against Nazi Germany, but they did eventually align in the face of German aggression. So, quoting Organsky here, he said that it is not the balance of power that leads to the peace, but rather than the imbalance of power. So, world peace is guaranteed when the nation satisfied with the existing international order and enjoy an unchallenged supremacy of power. And major wars are most likely when a dissatisfied challenger achieves an approximate balance of power with the dominant power. So we can see this context in the present US-China rivalry. So China, if we are talking of this rivalry, China has been conducting military exercise simultaneously in 4 seas. These are the Bohai Sea in the north, then the Yellow Sea, then East China Sea, and last is the South China Sea. So, and the current US-China trade war that recently, after this missile test, US sanctioned 24 Chinese companies for helping the Chinese military construct and militarize the internationally condemned artificial island in the South China Sea. Then if we talk of the order or disorder in the world politics, order grows out of the relative power among nations. For instance, during the 19th century, the powerful British Empire, based mainly on sea power, arranged much of the world of its liking. The small, weak islands largely obeyed it. Such power relationship create international system, the way power was distributed around the globe. So we can think international system is a sort of power map for a certain time period. Every nation knows where it stands. If many countries have approximately equal power, it is likely a balance of power system. If one power is having control of the world politics, might be a unipolar system, and USA after the end of the Cold War, we can see in this context. So if we talk of the globalization, during globalization, the order was to dominate the resource wars. All Middle East unilateral interventions we can recall now have resource control in the pretext of the human right abuse or responsibility to protect and so on. So the concept of sovereignty here came under threat. The powerful countries routinely dominated small, poor and weak countries. If we are in this context, in the context of sovereignty, we are taking the example of the Lebanon, for instance, lost its sovereignty and resulted in the civil war in 1975. And its territory partitioned by politico-religious group or militias and Israeli occupiers. Presently, US is claiming that the developing nuclear technology, I am giving the example of Iran here, that US is claiming that developing nuclear technology for peaceful means even is not the Iran's business, but the business of the whole world through in this context, Europe is also divided for this claim of the United States. So the misuse of these human rights or the R2P, these to invade the sovereign state, and sovereignty was very much questioned in this context. Then now I will discuss the major factors that why this world order is now a fractured world order, why China is emerging as a power, why the other powers in the Asia like Iran and Russia, they are the country to watch in the modern time. So the major factors behind it that we can see since President Trump took the presidency, then we saw the withdrawal from the Afghanistan, and this kind of withdrawal is being seen as a failure of the United States. Then strong resistance in the Middle East by Russia and China together. We can take the example of the Syria, for instance, and the other part, the Middle East. Then strong resistance by China in the China Seas. The collapse of, most important thing is that the collapse of the liberal institutionalism because of the US policies that we can we can easily witness the disrespect to the United Nations by United States of America, withdrawal of main bodies, either the climate bodies, WHO and others. So you can see the present instance of the superpower in this context. Then EU and NATO, they are also under threat by the United States of America, and they are confused somehow that how to deal with the situation, because Trump has repeatedly threatened NATO and EU for their security things. Then America first approach, it's coming to global to individualistic one. Then emergence of China as a confronting power. So these are the things, these are very important things to understand the present context of the world order. So the present situation indicate the collapse of the liberal institutions as issues such as human rights, free trade. These are the main parameters or the main institutions: human rights, free trade, international laws, and international organizations. They are struggling to survive in the present time. So if we recall, just before World War II, I will mention here E.H. Carr. He called liberals a kind of utopian. He used the word utopian for supposing that reason, negotiation, and mutual advantage could stop dangerous aggressions or aggressors. If we see trade as an example, it doesn't come easily. It must struggle against protectionism. Liberals assume that free trade benefits all, and it's a win-win kind of situation. But we see the poor countries, that it's not justifiable. Then it reflects that poor countries fear that the free trade only benefiting the rich and the powerful. It is a reality too. So take the example of the euro, for instance, that you illustrated how free trade promotes peace. Admit that realist, but European unification began only after Europeans had shedded enough blood of each other. Finally, under US protection, they accepted a series of treaties. But on the other hand, they were pushed into them by World War I and II, by American security guarantees. So now that protectionism has been threatened by the by US for not supporting US in each and every decade. So Europe is also in great confusion to shape its future security. So now, what is the future scenario, since time is running short? So I will just try to conclude. So US is looking badly to India for balancing China. They are having allies like Japan, Australia, and other. So US is also busy right now in Middle East to project Israel as a power to recognize the superpower in the Middle East, and pursuing allies to normalize the relationship with the Israelis. That we can witness Pompeo is visiting anywhere, recently visited Sudan, but with the agenda to normalize the relationship with Israel. And here there is one important thing, that Russia is also not open to some, because some territorial issues is still unresolved with China, but Russia will not join the Western bloc against China, given the present situation. But other powers such as Japan, Australia, and Taiwan are also looking to India to balance natural rival China in this context. So the realism should, there is a mention of our foreign minister yesterday by S. Jaishankar, that realism should shape India's China policy. So this message actually is speaking a lot. So India is a key country in the global power order that China also very well understand, and don't want to lose India in the leading global order against the West. So this was the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I hope that I finished in time, and I again thanks Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and the organizer for this grand event, and thank you very much from the core of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Slamhan, and thank you for good timing. For the whole picture you showed us of the world's developments as well was interesting. We will proceed with the topic now. We are moving to the presentation of Dr. Rashmi Kazi, Associate Professor at Jamia Millia Islamia in India. The topic is the new nuclear threat and the world order. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Greetings from India, greetings to Moscow, greetings to Nepal, greetings to everybody here. And thank you very much, NIICE for making this happen during the pandemic times. It's a very relevant, event, and thank you so much. So I know we are running short on time, so I'm going to be, straight hitting my presentation here. So essentially, we're talking about the new nuclear threat in the post-pandemic, situation that we are still going through. So we all know that the global nuclear arsenals, in terms of the numerical strength, it has been reduced to 1/3 of its size than what it was during the height of Cold War. So from an estimated 70,000 nuclear warheads, active warheads that I'm talking about, in 1996, we are now presently at a numerical strength globally, that is, 13,000, nearly 13,500 active nuclear warheads today, with of course 96% of these held by the United States and Russia. Now, several countries, there have been, we have seen that there has been a trend towards proliferation, but at the same time, several countries have also refrained from pursuing their nuclear weapons program and their strategic programs in the last 25 years. So for instance, we have the instance of Argentina and Brazil. They abandoned their strategic program in the 1980s. We also have the case of Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, South Africa. They abstained from pursuing their nuclear weapons program. This was in the 1990s. We also have the case of Libya and Iraq. They have also refrained from continuing with their strategic program. This was in the 2000s. Now, despite this, that a reverse trend towards proliferation, there is a fair amount of consensus amongst the experts that the gravest threat now is emerging from nuclear terrorism. In fact, this emerging consensus, this can be also well articulated by the famous historian Richard Rhodes, who says that the world faces a stark choice between eliminate nuclear weapons and secure their fissile explosives, or expect them to be used. Now, that is the choice that the stark choice that we are facing now. But if you're talking about eliminating nuclear weapons, how can we do that? How can we eliminate, how can we think of ways or make efforts to eliminate these dangerous weapons? So the emerging nuclear security consensus, as it appears, there are certain, efforts that have been articulated, that have been, sincerely being pursued. And these includes a commitment to eliminate nuclear weapons over time through certain practical steps towards that goal. We have the 13 practical steps towards that end, which includes verifiable reductions from within the US as well as the Russian nuclear arsenals. A ban on nuclear tests, which is very important, and of course, to put an end to the future production of nuclear weapons materials. Now, when these global efforts are being undertaken for moving towards global zero, or rather nuclear zero, it is expected that nations are, they are likely to cooperate and work out safeguards so that they are able to secure their stocks of highly enriched uranium and plutonium. This is one way, in fact, probably the one important way of, curtailing the path, the one possible pathway whereby, the terrorists can be denied the most important, aspect towards an act of nuclear terrorism is the acquisition of fissile material itself. That is the most difficult step in a whole act of nuclear terrorism. And also at the same time, if required, isolate, prevent, and as I said, if required, punish states, that try to start new programs, which are outside the purview of the established safeguards process. Now, this is important since we are already educated about the horrors of nuclear weapons. But then, when I say that, of course, we are reminded of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki incidents. But then this is probably not enough, because the way the state of things are, it seems that we need more inspiration. We need to be more inspired, rather inspired more. So we see that 58 years since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, we exist in a nuclear world that are dominated by not just two former superpowers, but there are 9 more nuclear states. And probably, I might sound very alarmist here, but there are possibilities of new one emerging as well. So as I said, it would not really make me a creative alarmist in that sense to believe that although there are the newly emergent nuclear powers, they might not make the same mistakes as the ones which were done by Russia and the Cold War, like adversaries, former Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War. But even if they don't make those mistakes, but they might be provoked to make, other mistakes which might be fatalistic in nature. So unfortunately, it appears that we are, like in the present scenario, we live in a new world where governments believe that nuclear weapons, will shield them, will allow them to engage in more aggressive actions, and they can also, use this as a method to indulge in further horizontal nuclear proliferation and increase this nuclear proliferation by selling their technology to other governments. We've had the cases of Pakistan, we've had cases of North Korea in this regard. And so it is a world where nuclear materials and weapons are becoming increasingly, when you have this kind of proliferation taking place, horizontal and even vertical for that matter, you are becoming more and more vulnerable. So you're increasing the vulnerability to more possible pathways where terrorists can acquire these dangerous materials through theft or other malicious ways. So one can argue that in fact, one can optimistically argue that the new nuclear powers, they need to be more cautious. They have to understand that there would be enormous repercussions on if this vulnerability increases. There would be enormous repercussions on a stable form of global nuclear defense. So, for example, if Iran today, is successful, we know there has been unraveling of the JCPOA, and this has not gone down well in Tehran. But if Iran is to obtain nuclear weapons, it would actually spread. The horizontal spread of nuclear weapons would be encouraged. Middle East would be up in flames if anything of that sort is to happen. But then I am not trying to say that nuclear passivity is the way through. Neither is any preventive war as such. So neither passivity nor preventive or preemptive war can steer the world towards a safer nuclear future. So gravity of the risk. So given this, the gravity of the risk that we are facing, it is imperative that we move towards global nuclear disarmament. That should be the goal. Of course, it's a complex goal. It will require a lot of, a mix of complex and global solutions. It cannot be done, it just cannot be the responsibility of, the non-nuclear weapon states or the nuclear weapon states as such. Somewhere there has to be a consensus to work this out together. Undoubtedly, there will be there can be global solutions, but it would be, it involves a lot of complexities. So, essentially, nuclear weapons, it has been we understand it has been a dangerous necessity during the Cold War days, and it heavily relied during the Cold War, the Cold War adversaries, they relied heavily on nuclear weapons to make sure that Cold War remained cold, and of course the parameter for ensuring that was through the dangerous concept of mutually assured destruction, that is MAD. But essentially, one needs to also understand that beyond this brutal simplicity of the Cold War days, the world has changed and changed quite irreversibly. There are technological developments that have taken place. There are alliances that are taking place. Globalization, we have the cyber threats, and all these developments are taking place and spreading at an accelerated pace. Essentially, this is also further, perturbed. We are also further perturbed by the fact that the economic shifts, the economic power shifts that have been led by these technology alliances and globalization, they have been also further accelerated and amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic, which makes it more hard, more difficult to define a state of stable relations among countries, particularly among, when we're talking about the nuclear weapon states, or for that matter, those, emerging nuclear weapon states. And especially so when they have all these nations and these nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states, they have different and unpredictable aspirations and objectives. So we've had the issue of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. This came up in 2017. Unfortunately, all the nuclear weapon states, abstained from voting this treaty. At present, 50 states are required to ratify this treaty, but only 40 states have so far ratified it. So it's very unfortunate, all these developments. The New START treaty, for that matter, that needs to be further. It's coming to an. It'll be expiring in February 21, and so far no efforts have been made to further replace it. Essentially, again, when we are talking about these treaties, the arms control issues are coming so much into into the picture. It brings us so much into crucial importance. It brings us to the fact that a global regime of arms control is very, very crucial to manage nuclear risk as they are existing today. So the choice that we are facing today, as Scott Sagan, one of the gurus in nuclear studies, according to him, the choice that we are facing today is not between a nuclear weapon-free world or to return to that, bipolar Cold War deterrence. But the choice today is between a nuclear weapon-free world or one with more nuclear states. Thank you for your kind attention.
Sorry, thank you, Dr. Kazi. That was very interesting. And what I can say from my point of view is that recently we really, in the world, we forget about the nuclear threat, and the whole, I could say, outdated already, unfortunately, the regime of nuclear control, because many of the countries want to forget about some agreements or to change the conditions of them. But the threat is still relevant, of course, and the pandemic or other new non-traditional threats do not cancel the nuclear threat that exists. Thank you. Now we are going to the next speaker, Dr. Lenin Kumar, who is assistant professor at School of Government, MIT World Peace University in India, and his topic is post-COVID-19 world order and democratization of international institutions. So please, the floor is yours now.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for a nice and for giving such opportunity and the chair. So most of the topic related to post-COVID world order has been covered by Dr. Aslam Khan and Rashmi Kazi and Liaquat Khan and many other panelists. But I have looking at this thing towards a liberal or more like a political science perspective rather than just IR student, IR scholars. Before we are going to this post-COVID world order, first we have to look exactly when the COVID situation started. Before that, what was the world order? Otherwise, it will be very difficult to understand how to come out of it or how to analyze this thing. And the COVID world order, it was witnessing the rise of the far rights globally, whether it's US, whether it's Latin American countries, even in Europe, where Poland, where you can say Italy, you can say UK, most of the countries, the far right groups are rising with the nationalistic feeling and pitching their, it's more like a nativism against outsider. Such an example you can say, you can talk about Brexit, and there was a migration crisis. It was in the immigration and migration crisis in Europe, which was resulted, saying it helped to rise up the far right parties in Europe, like UK. You can say Mary Le Pen, and you can say this UKIP, United Kingdom Independent Party. So that the pre-COVID order is not as much as better as a post-COVID what we are discussing now, because you see that time Donald Trump was announced the tariff war against uh, tariff he was waging trade war against China. Then there was a conflict within the subcontinent, India and Pakistan. We are consistently war and border issues. Now, if you look at before COVID world issue come, COVID-19 came, then the question of, I think what Donald Trump was summarized in his made in UN speech. He said, "I am not internationalist. I am a nationalist. I am look for my national, interest." So that statement itself, conclude, what we are thinking about, how we, is in the general term we say US as the world leader of the free world. So it's, he does not want to be a leader of free world, rather than he's a leader of their own America. So now we look in during the pandemic. I think pre-pandemic era, the nation state which was taken back of this neoliberal order post 1991 economic, post 1991 Soviet Union demise, then it was integrated to unipolar world order, then again it was went to this hyper globalization, economic globalization, then again the rise of far right was bringing us back to the basic question of brought the nation first rather than business, or rather than the globalization first. Now the second aspect of my paper, I would like to talk about how the pandemic, during pandemic, what is the reaction, what is the response from certain countries in the across the globe, where first of all this pandemic also used to polarize the world order and to consolidate the far right grips over the politics. Like you can take example where US President Donald Trump consistently calling that is a Chinese virus, where there was a consistent campaign in India by the far right and right wing groups, and they have been shared the post, everything saying, it's how China is trying to defeat India by creating virus. It was a deliberate act of Chinese conspiracy. In UK and other European countries successfully used this cause and the virus in the COVID-19 situation to consolidate their position. So then, if you come to the question of during the lockdown, during the phase of the COVID, it started in the February, but many of the countries taken this issue much seriously in the month of March. The number of cases are increased in Italy, Iran, and China. The number was increased, so these people are started taking much more seriously. But if you look at more carefully how things are happened, because one is reflected in the failure to contain such a pandemic situation, because the world organization was not prepared to handle such a crisis. That is what it's reflected. And second, most of the time when we talk about the, how the lockdown was affecting more, we are talking about the economic aspect of the this thing, how it will affect the trade, how it affect the business. But one of the major component of the entire business and the lockdown is about how well we are prepared to treat. Our healthcare went back, and the business aspect of the international order came first. If you look into this, entire situation, uh, in the middle of the pandemic, United States was pulled out of WHO, United World Health Organization. That is one of the key aspects which shows how the world order is actually, how the international institutions are being treated regularly, because it's not only WHO, even the Human Rights Council where US pulled out because of it was voted against Israel. When we want to look up with the democratization of the international institution, first of all we have to see why the international institution came into the exist. It came to exist for three major reasons. One, to prevent economic catastrophe like 1930s. Economic collapse should not happen, because 1930, the 20s, 30s economic collapses lead to the far right government in many part of the world, in Europe. Then it's lead to the war. So in post Second World War, the international organization created not only to prevent such a global scale war, also to prevent such a economic, a crisis should not happen again. That is what we established the World Bank and IMF, International Monetary Funds, and United Nations, and you have a GATT, then later into to WTO. So the purpose it's not only to prevent a war, but to create and control the economic activity and creating further crisis global level. But if you the look at the later half of the 20th century or end of 20th century and beginning of the 21st century, which itself in the 2008 crisis, it's again repeatedly proven, because the 8 crisis lead to many of the far right, rise of the far right. It also creates such a situation where this the, the very reason which the economic institutions or international economic institutions established, the very reason they failed, which was noticed by the IMF, where when we come to this uh, post world order, where you have post COVID world order, there is a few important aspects we have to see. Are we going to see post world order as a same as a pre world order, post COVID world order? I don't think so. Are, are we going to say we are going to emerge out of more egalitarian, more acceptable world order for entire unity? I don't think so, because if you see even this between the pandemic, the WHO is merely the institution was giving rather than the press conference, then involving actively to promoting, vaccines, where you can see Russia suddenly announcing they found a vaccine, where US is trying. So it's more like a competing to prove a superiority rather than preventing the international global level calamity. So where the entire situation of the post-COVID world order maybe maybe it can be positive, but mostly the current situation proven the rise of far right. Like take example, there is a uh, violence in UK where the far right groups went to check people in the asylum seekers, and yesterday there in Swedish there is a uh, far right people burn the Quran and has demonstrating. They organized the violence, a riot in Sweden. So during the pandemic also, the rise of the far right, it's not stopping. The rise of far right also, it's a major source to threaten the international world order. So when you have talking about the post-COVID world order, that the post-COVID world order should be more egalitarian, more acceptable, rather than just passing through the COVID order, then entering into this, nationalistic feeling. But when we come to the issue of the recent time, I think it's also brought to we should be discussed and this thing, why suddenly the question of rise of China and Russia became a question, because of it's a question of democracy, whether it's a question of it's a question of their economic superiority, whether the question of their human rights. I don't think so, because the pre-COVID world order, the so-called established liberal world order, does not have any problem with country which is not democratic country, whether it's the question of as in the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the West Asian region, in the Middle East region, or many countries in Africa and Latin America, and countries like Pakistan, which had a military rule for some time and many things. I don't think so that is the case. Democracy, it's not a question of bringing the world order. When you're talking about the world order, it should be combination of both. We have to engage with them, because they are not democratic country does not mean we should be neglect them to bring the world order along with them. That will only create further issue, where the the pre second world order, post second world war world order, which was the result of some certain historical conjectures, historical necessity. But now after we looking at after 75 years, I think that historical necessities, that historical factors are changed, where where if you see Take example of Africa. There is no representation in Africa, and in Latin America there is no proper representation in Latin America. So then Asia it's only China. India is a consistently was asking about India's participation in the United Security Council. So the post-COVID world order have to be shared. The world order has to be shared. It cannot be same as the pre-COVID world order. But what prevent them? It's not only far right, because of the old established hegemonic understanding of it's a west only can be controlled because their economic superiority, because of their military superiority. That will not serve the purpose to bring the better world order, which is not it's not only me are saying, it's even recognized by the IMF. A recent IMF report in June which says there is three key issues which will be the key important in the pandemic, during the pandemic, post pandemic. One is talk about the international institutions should recognize there is a global imbalance in the global order, so to resolve it they have to accommodate the other countries. Second, it's a climate change, which is one of the major issues. And third, they talk about economic inequality, which was the case in 1930s. It helped the rise of the far right. It was the case in 2018, which resulted in the current far right government to address it, where the IMF also quoted saying during the pandemic, the the multinational companies earned 565 billion, which other side the labors, not only particularly to India or Asian countries, in globally there are 42 million people are lost their jobs. So when we're going to discuss about the world order, if the world order cannot be not only preventing the war, rather than providing the equal distribution of something, which no world order can be established, whether the International Labor Organization, whether it's WTO, whether it's IMF, whether it's World Bank, despite their consistently appeal, the countries which establish themselves as the leaders of the liberal world order, they continue to neglect this aspect. So when we talk about the post-world order, it has to be more egalitarian. It should be, the world order has to be shared, and to sharing that also mean it should have basic economic equality. Where if you say example, German is considered to be a more liberal society, but in Greece, where the entire Greece there is a referendum about saying they will not accept the austerity. The German was forced Greece to accept the austerity measure, which went against the very much concept of European Union. So people have started seeing the European Union as the person to enforcer, rather than the democratic institution. So to make democratic institution, it have to be considered the country's demand and the historical background and historical necessity. So unless these things are not addressed, I think we will be in a vicious cycle. We'll not have a pandemic, but we'll have something else, like it may be not a war, it may be more nationalistic governments will be preventing the free movement of not only capital people, but also capital. So this much I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lion Kumar. That was interesting, say, as insight about the internal developments in the societies, in the economic dimension. Now we have time for discussion. If we don't have questions from our online translation, I will ask myself. I have different questions which appeared while our speakers were talking about. I will ask directly to the speakers in the order which we had. My first question will be to Professor Liaquat Ayub Khan about non-traditional threats. Exactly, will there be some reforms in the international level? I mean, for example, on the level of United Nations organization, which would be inspired by the pandemic? I mean, is there any space for closer cooperation because of the COVID-19 pandemic? because now we see more about nationalistic development and isolation route of the country. So is there any opportunity for reforms on the international level? Sorry, we don't hear you, Dr. Leopard.
Sorry, I could,
Yeah.
now. Now, this is a very good and a very important question to be asked, that whether there will be a change of mindsets. The mindsets are going to change in the sense that earlier the Millennium Development Goals were administered by UN, and the states were supposed to go, but they were going slow onto looking after their own people, looking after their own population, looking out after their own state. Now the people on their own will be forcing the states to very well go and look at to the situation. And that's the reason why the states are becoming more nationalistic. They are not thinking of globalization, but they are thinking of nationalism. And nationalistic ideas will bring in lot of conjunctures within the old system, and thereby you will see that the states which were putting a lot of money into military hardware would shift. They will not make a bigger shift, but they will definitely have to make a shift looking towards their own people, because the states cannot go on just buying military hardware in order to protect states, rather than building or developing their own state by giving a lot of priorities to the people. I hope I have answered this question now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then my next question will be to Dr. Aslamkhan. You talked about the power shift, about new, I could say, rising hegemons. Here in Russia, we have probably a little bit another perception of the world order and how powers are developing. But anyway, there are such global trends like US losing their powers and influence in the world, and China is getting more and more powerful. So what do you think about the influence of pandemic, of the COVID-19 developments on China power? Will COVID-19 give more power or less power to China in the region and in the whole world at all?
Thank you very much for asking the questions. So you are asking what kind of the influence of pandemic China has in terms of the world politics.
Yes, exactly.
So my answer is that it was a defining moment as far as the China's strategy is concerned, right from the beginning when the pandemic, this COVID-19 start, right from that period to the country starting blaming China that it is a source of this COVID-19 virus. But in between, you can see that how China diplomatically reached throughout the world, whether it is in Africa, Asia, everywhere, is supplied PPE kits and all kind of the mechanism, ventilators, even to Europe and all places. So it is a kind of, that outreach that China has shown, that what kind of the power in terms of the other infrastructural area they have, and they can deliver to the world at the time of the crisis. So it was a defining moment if we are considering in this manner. On the other end, that when the pandemic started spreading throughout the world, then countries started blaming China. Then the face of the politics start here. Then people start alliances against China, countries starting alliances against China, and somehow pressurize China to conduct an independent inquiry to the origin of the virus. So, but it clearly reflects the liberal angle into it, the constructivist angle into it, and at the same time the realist angle to it, and the kind of that less of Lockean approach and more of Hobbesian approach. And if we consider as of now situation is beyond Machiavellian. So it is my answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question to Dr. Rashmi Kazim is about, again, about our pandemic, COVID-19. Is there any direct connection of the pandemic and nuclear regime? I mean, is there any opportunity or just threat, probably, of the pandemic to influence on the nuclear regimes, or they are just disconnected? What do you think about that?
Everything is, it's very difficult to draw any direct connection here. But given the conspiracy, theories that are emerging, the fact that the COVID-19 is not an artificial virus, but it can be engineered. I mean, there are theories which are emerging, and such engineered laboratory generated viruses, they have been done with certain, intentions, which are, of course, given, of course, as per the conspiracy theories, these viruses have not been developed, or rather developed with certain malicious agenda in mind. Given the fact that, it can be a bio threat, if that so be the case, it emerges as a bio threat, a WMD threat, So in that sense, we are only getting more and more convinced over the fact that we already know chemical weapons have been used for, by terrorists. The terrorists have also accomplished their, if I can use it that way, I don't want to sound again a creative alarmist, but these are factual data. They have already accomplished their feat with chemical weapons. We've seen in the case of Syria, Yemen, Mosul. They have also used the Aum Shinrikyo group. They used bioweapons. They've also used chemical weapons to spread acts of terror. So for them, if we have to go by, their logic, the next technological feat that they would like to achieve or make a mark is with nuclear weapons. That's the next, technological level that they can take a jump to. And as we know, terrorist strategies, the way terrorism works and the strategies that they basically employ is to terrorize people, and not only directly, but also a psychological impact that is left on, the victims as such. So in that sense, we need to keep in mind that post-pandemic period, there are a lot of technological innovations that are taking place. There are, a lot of, the boundaries of, there are boundaries of blurring between the new emerging technologies, like hypersonic missiles that are coming up. There are hypersonic gliders which are there. Different kind of conventional weapons are there, which kind of, blurs these boundaries between conventional and non-conventional, aspects. So in that sense, yes, if not a direct connection, but this is a time where arms control measures needs to be more in place so that we can prevent a cataclysmic, effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kazi. Yes, and I also would like to add that terrorist groups also dream about access to chemical and biological weapons as well. So probably the consequences of such access will be even much worse than now we have during the pandemic. We have a question from the chat box to Mr. Lenin Kumar. It's about relations between COVID-19 and democratic institutions. So the question is, the democratic and most powerful countries of the world are most affected by COVID-19. Is there any relations between COVID-19 and democratic institutions? So as I see, the question is that those countries with democratic institutions are affected much more by COVID-19. So please, your floor now is given to you, and what do you think about that?
See, if you see the COVID situations, like it started in China, then it's Iran, and spread in many ways. But the response is one of the key aspect. But like in US, the response is completely different. Actually, we all know, if you're watching TV, it's about the people. They are having this highly, like I say, the president himself say it's a conspiracy. It's a Chinese conspiracy to undermine the Chinese conspiracy to undermine the US actually, to win over US. And Bolsonaro, in the Brazilian president, also said the same thing. We have to go back to work. He said, I don't need to wear a mask. Like take example India, where the Indian response is just a lockdown rather than the medicine. Actually, the scientific way to actually, if you say democratic institution, the democratic institution should be based on more scientific and rationally rather than the whims and wishes of the particular leader. So that's why you see the three countries like India, Brazil, and US, Brazil, India. These three countries have, completely, despite having a democratic elected leader, but their approach to science and the approach to health issue, it's completely exposed their governance model. Rather, that's also come with the far right understanding and tackling the pandemic situation, that you can see the small countries like in New Zealand was successful, and the country to the undemocratic, like you say, you can see this countries like Russia, you can see China, because they use the state machinery. Using the state machinery was the key. How the state can respond to such a pandemic, not just because of their state control, because of to understand and control it. Where despite the state controlled by this far right big leader, the leader themselves don't believe in such things. Actually, they say Trump, Bolsonaro, India, they don't test much unless the recently the numbers are going to be increased actually. So I think it's about the behavior of the state and response of the state is important, more like a democratic institutions per se.
Mhm. Thank you. We also have the next question. I think it's again to Dr. Kazi, but if anyone wants to answer as well, that would be nice. So the question is, does growing isolationism in the world have a relation with the possible increase of nuclear weapons?
I didn't quite get that.
I think that the question is that while countries is getting more and more self-isolated, maybe they get more suspicious, as I see the question, and because of that, they begin to obtain more and more nuclear weapons. That I could interpret it like that.
Well, there, as I said, we have to face this. We are facing this stark choice between, a nuclear-free world and more nuclear weapons coming in. So it's the way things are unraveling. With the New START treaty, we see, both United States and Russia, they are not, very sincere over this treaty, replacing the New START treaty with renewing it rather. Then their abrogation of the ABM, anti-ballistic missile treaty. The non-proliferation treaty already has been, it's already so shaken. The non-proliferation regime has been shaken by so many, the flouting of the objectives and the principles as such. I wouldn't say, I would rather be optimistic and believe that there has to be concerted efforts. There has to be, again, as I said, passivity is not the way out. Neither can be any aggressive policies. What is need of the hour is deterrence strategies. Nuclear weapons, we cannot wish them away. They are going to be here for at least some time. So during that period, what we can do, so to prevent, proliferation, both horizontal and vertical, is to have a game theory which is win-win-win for all, both for the nuclear weapon states as well for the non-nuclear weapon states. So for that matter, when we're talking about arms control, China is emerging as a very big, factor with the kind of military technology revolution that China is undergoing at present. It is creating a lot of, there's a lack of confidence and mistrust, which is, taking place within the global regime. So one can think it's difficult, it's complex. When we are talking about nuclear issues, obviously we are talking about very complex issues. But then we can be optimistic. There can be efforts in terms of a trilateral arms control regime where US, China, and Russia, they can work together in terms of having a much more stable regime, a stable world order rather, where deterrence strategies can be, even if if we have to go by game theory, it will be win-win-win, as in like just not win-win like in the Cold War days, but for US, China, and Russia, win-win-win. We can think about an optimistic and much more stable world order. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question, my personal question to all of our panelists. So everyone who is want to answer is welcome. The question is, do you think that the COVID-19 with the whole number of lockdowns, restrictions, closed borders, really affect the changes in the world order, or it is just a trigger which showed the existing problem, so it didn't influence in any way? So what do you think about that?
Respond?
Yeah, who is ready?
You told that lot of lockdowns and closing of the borders with other countries. This will actually, this situation, we can analyze this situation in so many ways, that if we are seeing that first foremost important thing is the protection of the human lives. So all of the state, they give preference to protect their own citizens. And you can see here that when we are seeing of the cooperation, here everybody is looking their own houses first, then they are cooperating with each other. First, we have to save our own people. So some kind of the, I will not say self-centric, but it was a need of the hour, that first nation's foremost important priority is to protect its citizens. So now the question comes that I will also connect with that, the previous question with yours, that in terms of the acquiring nuclear weapons in the pretext of isolation and all. So that you can see that since Dr. Rashmi, she talked about trilateral kind of the regime, that China, Russia, and US, they can play a very important role. A kind of win-win situation can come for all. But if I am seeing the Middle East scenario, the current development in the Middle East, in the backdrop of the pandemic, then there is a kind of the compromise with Saudi Arabia from United States, that and they are very much willing to develop their nuclear program, whether either they're calling it a peaceful or something like that. But this kind of things are happening here, and US is backing Saudi Arabia for that matter. On the other hand, Iran's nuclear program is being threatened by United States time and again. So this situation, if we see that, for instance, that if Iran is going to be nuclear, so it is not in the interest of the Russia too. It is not in the interest of the China too. And it is not in the interest of United States. They are opposed to it. But on the other end, if these kind of the things are emerging with Saudi Arabia or the other Sunni allies of America in Middle East, then this will create a kind of the competition. Then US will have no face to stop either Iran, if giving consideration to the Pakistan's relationship with the Saudi Arabia in the present time. The Pakistan's nuclear arsenal was considering as the part and parcel and partnership with the Saudi Arabia previously, but now the changing scenario, the influence of the Turkey and the divide in the Islamic world, it is giving a new picture and new kind of the dimension to the whole Middle East politics. So one thing that the protection of the people was important. On the other end, some other kind of the program, the security programs are going on, some war exercise, some military exercises, some that warmongering provocation by Iran, America, and other powers, China, for instance. So these things are also happening simultaneously. So security is very important. Either it is a security of the people, people within the territory, or people outside the territory. It is my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Han. Who is going to be next, please?
So, okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Now,
Dr.
one thing is very let me. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Like this has been very different situation. Like COVID-19 has become an absolute weapon to destroy the whole mindset of the states. And this has also brought to an understanding that weapons are not just arsenals which can be kept with you. Like look at to the blast that happened at Beirut. Like nobody could have imagined that that some kind of chemical would would bring it this blast. The state has been brought to the knees, and the whole government has been brought down just because of one blast. And because of this COVID-19, the whole world has been shaken. And China, whether you say this has conspiracy theories or not, but it has been an absolute weapon against the states. And with this particular weapon, now China do think of changing the world system, or what you say, world order, which earlier was not happening in a very systematic or cohesive way. Earlier, it was the Western dominance over the world order or the international system. Like we could not have thought of 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 a declaration by a president or a prime minister. Like for example, the Russian president declaring that the first vaccine being given to his daughter. What does that mean? It also means that the confidence between the leaders have been shaken up with COVID, and thereby it has actually brought the will bring changes in the mindsets, not only looking towards their own people but also looking towards own region. Now what we also see, that there will be a growth of technological advancement into space research. Now space will become one of the most important area in order to bring states onto the common platform, because space has been leftover. Space was the only leftover that the countries were not bringing onto the platform. Now, space really has brought in, like what we are today discussing online. It is just because of the satellites of the space that we are able to talk to people on a far-fetched grounds. It is not that we need to not talk to only on face to face, but also from a far off distance. So this is where the COVID-19 has brought changes into the mindsets, and also would definitely China will bring in a lot of changes onto the systems, which earlier it was more tilted towards West. Now it is more tilted. I don't say, I don't want to predict anything, but there is a movement where the Asian order will also come in to the picture after the COVID system. That is what I would like to say. Anything to add would be, I will be happy to hear. Yeah, thank you.
My for quick response is yes. What you are saying, whether it will have a repercussion, the closing border and lockdown. Yeah, but like Dr. Aslam Khan pointed out the few points, yet we wanted to, the countries wanted to look after themselves. Home first come. It's a very much safe. We have to protect our own citizen. But the question will also will be this lockdown, this closing down the border, it will also lead to xenophobic and racism, because the closing down the border is not happen now because the COVID every country done it. Like I said, travel ban by Donald Trump, and you can see the entire immigration crisis in Europe. It was a completely shut down. Hungary, Greece, Denmark, or Germany, UK. That itself lead to that itself lead to a xenophobic rise of the far right parties. Actually, yes, this lockdown might be in the short term, it might help to contain the virus and all, but the solution should be, founding the vaccine, and also, to fight this this far right, this thing. Otherwise, if you see, what is the vaccine the US, the name was Russia supposed to give, it's a Sputnik. So the Sputnik is the first, the satellite that this thing was done by Russia. So the superiority and bringing the nostalgia of once we are a superpower, it's there in the vaccine itself. The name of vaccine itself has this, nostalgic superpower. We send the first man into the space. We will be the first country to have a vaccine. So that universalism, the globalization, globalism is gone. It's more like a we are who is going to be a first leader. The last point about isolationism, that's one of the important point is, see, the globalization is there since ancient time. From the everything was since there. When there is food, everything was there. The entire colonialism is the globalization. But the current globalization, it's about just the exchange of the economy and trade, rather than the exchange of human being. If you don't have an exchange of human being, so like take example travel ban. If you are saying we are globalist, why don't you accept the people from the Middle East, where they are facing an immigrant crisis? I think this entire episode of we have to entirely have to study and have to prepare the future world order. What went to wrong now? Without that, we cannot look, future have to, future can be built only by looking at the learning lesson from the past. Thank you.
Mhm. I think, yeah, I would like make short comments about Russian vaccine. Yes, Sputnik 5 is very symbolic indeed, because for Russia and for Russian, I could say, position and abroad it is very important to show the connection with this invention. At the same time, Russia now has some alternative tests of other vaccines. So maybe in several months we will see another alternative names and another vaccines which other institutions are now testing. So there is some domestic internal competition as well. Dr. Kaza, do you have any comments as well?
Very quickly, I mean, I agree with Dr. Lenin Kumar, particularly on his last, point that globalization has been there, but in the post-pandemic period, the globalization, I think it's just reinforced. And given that, what is also adding to it is the technological innovations and the technological advancements that has been taking place, particularly in the weapon sector. So as I mentioned, like you have these hypersonic missiles, you have artificial intelligence, and there is most important the blurring of, lines between different types of weapons that is taking place. So, what I'm trying to emphasize is that there is a huge emphasis on this technological advancement, and it can be used for, for good intentions. It can be also used for nefarious purposes. And very quickly, Dr. Khan, I agree with you. I couldn't, disagree. I mean, agree with you more. But the fact that, when you have powers like US and Russia and now China also, coming up with this again, revolution in its military technology. You have its, like China has its Dongfeng 26 that can hit Guam. It's 21 ballistic missile. Dongfeng 21 can hit areas around South China Sea. Obviously, these kind of, revolution, military achievements, they create a lot of mutual distrust. And again, that sense of suspicion, which I just answered in one of the questions that was asked. So it becomes a huge responsibility on powers which are, rather holding these nuclear warheads and arsenals in huge numbers to make that impact, to make that, effort, and even take those initiatives whereby we can stop, countries like Iran and assure them. What is important is to assure them, because I understand what you're saying is absolutely right. If Iran has to go nuclear today, it will have a huge domino effect in the whole of Middle East. It's absolutely right. But then what can be done to prevent that, horizontal proliferation? Because it's not in the interest of mankind to have, a world with more and more nuclear weapon states. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or want to contribute? Uh, yeah. Okay. Then, as we have some time yet, I will ask another question about how to, I could say, to live through the period of waiting. Now the whole world is waiting for the vaccination. In fact, many of the countries are still in lockdown, so have some strict restrictions. They're closed close their borders. Russia, for example, still do not accept foreigners. So how on the international level and the same on the domestic level should we now react, as we have some very restricted capacities, and we cannot very quickly come back to the normal life? So should this be really a time of waiting while the vaccine is invented, tested, fully approved, and or should we adapt to the new rules and just to accept that we have to live in this new reality? I mean, with the check of your health at each institute or extension, where you go to the airports and so on. So what are the main steps to do, like for person, for states now? Because it's, of course, it's a big discussion. It's a Nobel Prize question, but anyway, you have probably your personal perception of that. So it will be just interesting to hear.
Can I go first?
Yeah, sure.
You are saying, should we wait or not? That's one of the
Yes.
questions you asked. Okay. I think we should wait, and there is a two other to wait have a different way. The thing about Europe and Asia, it's completely different actually, because of the density of the population. Where the Europe in a rural, the cities will be in a, it's because one house to next house there is a gap actually. Even the small county to next county have a gap. Here it's not. Like if you go to India, any place, take example of Maharashtra. In the state of Maharashtra, now it's the highest number of COVID cases in India. If you go to Bombay, you don't have any space to land itself actually. So it's a question of how to tackle without putting the economic barrier. One we can do is, it's a more campaign among the people, awareness campaign, which is necessary, which should be not involve any conspiracy theories which strongly involved by the far right group. In whether if you go and see, there are conspiracy theories like anything, where people are saying wearing mask itself is the problem, saying the wearing mask itself is create more coronavirus actually, so you should not wear mask. But other incident, okay, if you other incident, the government should invest more on health issues actually. In the travel time, how we are going to, it's not a travel, it's not only flight travel, where you have a travel in the train, travel in the local buses. I think the state has to step up to address the concerns of this thing. Now it cannot be a business will take care of the state. Now the time for a state, as a conventional state, to involve in the business, because it have to be taken care, it should be take care of the people, because private actor cannot do it for a citizen. They will do it for a profit. One more incident in Korea, they contained a virus, but the second wave is happening in Korea. Why? Because of there is a 50 people got affected in single Starbucks, the coffee shop, Starbucks. The second wave started in one coffee shop. The second wave started in Korea. So whether one, you should not have a exactly like Indian experience, where you have a lockdown, you are not able to move, you are not able to do, where you don't test much. But other side, okay, you don't have a lockdown, but you can make a social distance, you can start living. I think you should have a more intense scientific campaign with the student rationality, and you have to have coordination. I think there is no coordination among anyone, like we already discussed. Like who is going to create vaccine is the competition among the country, rather than how to create, what is the experience of different countries actually. So I think we have to wait and see, because of the most affected people will be in the poor, rather than the people who are rich. That is what our Indian experience says, because they couldn't afford to go to hospital, so people die. Those who are offered, they can go pay in thousands of dollars. If you go by dollars, and they can get proper treatment. And other people cannot do. So that way, the state has to ensure the safety of people. The state has to be back in terms of international level, in terms of policy level.
Thank you. I see who is going to be next, who wants to contribute.
Yeah, yeah. When we assume that COVID-19 has changed the whole mindsets. Now, when we say mindsets, the states see there was this idea of collision between the state and the religion, and the states were trying to somehow harness their ideology with religion, and religion did not come to the help of state. And that is one of the reason why in a lot of countries the state is being what do you say, arm twisted by the religionist, and thereby it has actually made difficult for the state to follow one proper order which comes from WHO. And thereby what has happened is this kind of order which is not being followed, it also says that the states are living into different paradigm. When the states are living in different paradigm, they are not dealing with a different virus. They are dealing with the same virus in a different idea. Now, if you are not able to educate your own people, how are you going to how are you able to stop this virus? Now, when Dr. Lenin was saying that just because of a Starbucks coffee shop, the second wave began in Korea. Now, in India, you have so many pockets where you have different myths, and with the myth, you also have a lot of wishful thinking. Why I say wishful thinking is because there is not only religion which affects the Indian society, but even the social structure within the society is such that it goes beyond the idea of religion. Like for example, like you can have a fundamentalist, Hindu fundamentalist or an Islamic fundamentalist. You can have a moderate Islamist. You can have a moderate Hindu. You can also have a modern Hindu, and you can also have a modern Islamist. And thereby you can see, unless until you are able to educate people in a right way, in a right direction, the whole idea of dealing with this virus will be difficult. And thereby, if you are still going to wait for the vaccines to come and not educate people, would be simply like you are making an attempt to carry people to suicide. You cannot just tell them that you have to wait. You need to educate them, whether you have vaccine or not. But still, you have to also know how to avoid virus, how to avoid the pandemic, how to avoid the disease. If you are not able to, like for example, in Mumbai, you had when the virus began in a big way, we had one hospital called Kasturba Hospital, which was a long built hospital during the Spanish flu time, 1920s and 30s. That hospital was built, and people used to laugh that what is this hospital being bifurcated into such a large premises, small buildings. And today the whole Mumbai is basically dependent onto that particular hospital during this particular virus. So what I say is, the state also has to educate and has to go further. Whether a vaccine comes today or tomorrow, it will definitely come, but it will take certain time. But while it comes, we also need to educate our own people, our own populations, how to stay, because there are many virus, there are many disease where we don't have solutions to them. Like for example, Ebola. Still the vaccine is not, proper vaccine is not there. Like AIDS, again, a proper vaccine is still not there. Again, cancer, it is still predictability about some symptoms, but again, there is no solution. People die after cancer after a second phase or third phase. So people should be educated how to live, and this can only come by having a rational and scientific thinking. The science has to go, the state has to propagate science in order to see that the population is properly equipped. Not the religion. This was a time when the religion had equipped people how to stay together, behave in a proper way. Now it is a scientific world where the sciences should come forward to educate people beyond religion, beyond the system, where we will be able to stay together with this particular virus. This is what I would like to put forth. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. So we're short of time. We have several minutes. If someone wants to contribute, Dr. Samhan, yeah, please some short comments.
Since you talk about the people's mindset and the role of the leaders also, it comes into. So because since if we are going to compare with the developed society and the third world, then we can see that a lot of the things that were already developed over there, whether it is a technology, whether it's other kind of the infrastructure. So if we are going to compare with them, it's a huge divide. So here we can see that in everybody's life, some new normals are there, that since so people throughout the world, they are connecting with each other, they are sharing the ideas. Schools, colleges, universities, they have adopted the system of the online teaching and learning. And on the other hand, health services also, most of the doctors available, they are also start seeing the patient online, for that matter, to protect themselves, because it was a huge loss of lives for the doctors and the other paramedical staff too. So these things are also developing. On the other hand, if we see the societies like in third world societies, that most of the peoples are, majority of the people are living below poverty line. So if we see the condition of those people, they are not having the access of the modern technology. They are not having the things that they can earn bread and butter. Government is helping, but in this kind of the situation, the help is not enough. So it is a kind of the do and die situation for those people. They don't have work, because if it was started the initial stage, all people start helping each other. And when the people are uncertain that how long it is going to be, because you are helping somebody once, twice, thrice, but you cannot help somebody always. So these kind of the situations are also emerging. And what I can observe, that the middle class or the lower middle class, they are affecting a lot. For example, if government is giving aid, some money to the poor, they can go in and collect the money. But this kind of the middle, for example, take the example of the judiciary, for instance, the courts, lawyers, because you see that they are going, their earning is depending on the cases they are taking. If they are not going there, they're not attending the court, what will be the situation with them? And they cannot beg, they cannot, that this kind of the worst affected, that I am making a kind of the analysis of my own, that those people are the most affected people in this pandemic. So since there is we were also talking about the development of the vaccine throughout the world, and the word vaccine nationalism is very much, that highlighted in the present time, that America is there, Russia, and every developed country, or the country with the technologies, they are working to come out with the vaccine, and near future, we hope it will come. But in the meantime, let's take the psychological situation of the students at home, children at home. The kind of the technology or the kind of the internet speeds we have, they are not satisfied. And one after one, they are attending the classes 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. They are sitting continuously on either on the mobile device or on systems. So it is adversely affecting their health. mental health and psychological health, and they are in the flux what to do. So in this kind of the situations, people in the lockdown or since people are not having the access of the parks and all, they are, that some people are having diabetic and they are having heart problems. They are also facing a severe kind of the situation with them. So technology cannot help in these regards. So the people are having different perception, different problems, but solutions are not there, because now our most important thing is how to protect the life. But by this way, people, now I am seeing that people are dying because they are not getting treatment. They are not taken into the hospital. So they are dying without treatment, rather than if they are going to have a treatment, the lives can be saved. So these things also emerging. These are the so many data I have that very influential pupils, even in the capital like India, they are not getting admitted before, but now the government is trying hard to come out of those crises. But these are the stark realities, because everywhere I can see that even doctors are avoiding to see a patient physically. Student-teacher interaction is online, and the countries those don't have the technologies. Students are also facing problem. Exams, for instance, that a whole session is going to be, that government wants to conduct the exam, but on the students and the parents having different concerns that if they are going to have the exam physically, they might affect by this COVID-19. So a lot of the things psychologically, parents are disturbed, students are disturbed. So whole, that this course, if you are combining all these things, then the people are living in a very tough psychological situation. But people are coping with that, since we are connected, doctors are connected by online, but online is not the solution for all. And the people who are living below poverty line, they are facing a very dire crisis in terms of that. So my submission was like that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are in fact out of time, but we have, I already see the message of NIICE. Thank you so much. Thanks to all the speakers. I'm sorry if anyone wanted to add something but couldn't. I think the discussion was pretty interesting, and I also learned some interesting angles and perceptions for myself, and I hope the audience also enjoyed it. Now, at this point, we should give floor to another session. So there are already some speakers waiting. Thanks to NIICE for inviting me to be a moderator. So please stay safe, and let's fight this disease all together and overcome to the new and I hope more happy world order. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.